Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight for our second in our two-part speaker series on affordable housing. Home is here, el lugar está aquí. My name is Jen Creel, and I am the curator for the upcoming year of the Global Shapers Hub. For those who may not know, Global Shapers is a project of the World Economic Forum with the mission to empower a network of young people to drive dialogue, action, and change for the world we want to see. This network of young people is comprised of over 400 small groups called hubs, which makes up over 11,000 individual members across the world. Hubs can be found in 6 of the 7 continents all over the world, and each one works on one specific project over the course of 1 year. These hub projects are working to tackle our world's greatest problems at a community level. Everything from hunger to energy, from housing to social justice, and all the ways those issues overlap, hubs around the globe do research, collaborate with local experts, and curate potential solutions. They then turn to the greater Global Shapers community to share individual community ideas and solutions to support the global collective. Most years, our hub finds that there is no shortage of issues that we could focus on. But in this last year, when we were told to shelter at home, and in a year of passionate advocacy for Black Lives Matter, Me Too, Stop Asian Hate, and other marginalized and BIPOC-focused movements, our hub asked, but what about those who don't have a home to shelter in? What are the systems in place that disproportionately affect BIPOC folk in our community, especially as it pertains to housing? And what kind of future do we need to have to make housing work for everyone? It may be hard to believe, but a group of 20-year-olds did not solve affordable housing in 1 year. But we did find 2 things. We found that Lancaster has not just a few, but a lot of people who care about this specifically. From community-based organizations to government officials, there is no shortage of people who stay awake a lot of nights thinking about this. All those sleepless nights have led to a deep understanding of the historic systems that have worked against affordable housing and some creative long-term steps towards a solution. We as the Lancaster City Hub have had the great privilege to learn from and work with several of these experts over the last year. Last week, we heard from Tenfold CEO Mike McKenna discuss the historical roots and systemic issues that make affordable housing in general and specifically to BIPOC folks so difficult to solve across our entire county. We also heard from Lancaster City Council President Ismail Smith-Waddell, who gave a city and government-focused perspective about why affordable housing projects can still be out of reach for residents of the neighborhoods for whom they're built. Tonight, we look towards the future with a group of community experts about the future of affordable housing. Though through this series, we weren't able to feature all of the experts we have in our community working on this issue. We're hopeful that in these 2 nights, we've highlighted some of the key historic barriers and innovative solutions to make each member of our community feel and know that home is here. But before we get started, we would like to thank Millersville University's Ware Center for providing us, our speakers, and our artists the physical space to express the importance of this issue. Tonight's event is sponsored by the Millersville School of Social Work. We would also like to thank our artists who created powerful pieces about affordable housing that can be enjoyed in the Ware Center lobby until July 30. Those artists are Faith Dominguez, Selena Almanzar, Madeline Murphy, Chrissy Whiskey, and Darcy Bearclough. Finally, some housekeeping items. Bathrooms can be found out the lobby to the left of the welcome desk. You can get up at any time whenever nature moves you. We also ask that you hold all questions until the end, as we're hoping to have about 15-20 minutes to be able to have open Q&A between the audience and panelists. So, speaking of our panel, it is my pleasure to introduce our community panel for the future of affordable housing. We have Kirsten Jordan, the Executive Director of Safe House Lancaster, which recently became a program of the YWCA Lancaster, who will be moderating our panel. She will be joined by Ryan Gabriel Davis, founder of Starlight Saloon, Dr. Jennifer M. Frank, Assistant Professor at Millersville University School of Social Work, Carlos Graupera, CEO of SACA, and Ben Lesher, board member of Chestnut Housing Corporation and president and founder of SDL DevCo. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Hello, everyone. How are we? You can do a little crowd participation if you'd like to. There we go. Can everyone hear me all right? Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Kirsten, and I will be your moderator. I know the setup feels like a debate. I would like everyone to know that it is not. We are all on the same side of this issue, I believe. So this should be a fun and very informal conversation. First, a few housekeeping rules for me. What we will do for timing, for your introductions, we'll do about 3 minutes. I will give you a minute warning by just like holding up my pen and making eye contact with you to let you know. You can give me a head nod, that way we all know you acknowledge it. And then for the other questions, we're gonna do this about the same. We're gonna try and keep it about 15, 20 minutes for each question. So I will flag you with my pen when we are getting close to that time. So for our first question, we're just gonna have you introduce yourself, whatever organization or community aspect you are a part of, and what inspired you to do this type of work. So, Dr. Frank, would you like to start?
That would be fun. My name is Jennifer Frank. I am an assistant professor of social work with the Millersville University School of Social Work. And I already forgot the question. What is
That's
the question?
okay.
No, I'm just kidding. So how did I get involved in this work? So I am a teacher. I teach social work. I teach policy. I have created a course about poverty, and I created a course about homelessness. And I've done quite a bit of research about those kinds of topics. So that's definitely kind of my deep dive in terms of research and teaching. And it comes from my experience in the field. So I worked for 12 years at Tabor, which is now called Tenfold. And when I worked there, I did all kinds of housing-related stuff, specifically related to homelessness. So I worked a lot with families who were experiencing homelessness, helping them to find secure and stable housing. And out of that work, I ended up supervising programs and then developing programs for people who had been coming out of homelessness. So lots of stuff, research, teaching, and working in the field with people.
Would you like to expand on what got you into that type of work at all?
So, I mean, guess I've kind of always been the type of person who was rooting for the underdog, like always wondering why people were left out, and so always wanting to advocate, you know. And I had worked in social services in different roles before I worked in housing. And some of those roles were more bureaucratic in nature, where we had a lot of oversight in terms of telling people what they could do, what they couldn't do, and I didn't feel that was a good fit for me. So definitely like the empowerment approach, the social work approach, and kind of grassroots advocacy, working directly with families, and that type of thing. So right now, I'm doing a couple different things in terms of poverty in our community. I am a founding member as well as the vice president of our board for the Loft Community Partnership, which is addressing poverty in the Penn Manor School District. So that's another thing that I'm involved in.
Awesome, and I'm so sorry. I forgot to ask if you could also share your pronouns with us.
Sure, she, her.
Awesome, thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for asking that.
No problem. Ben, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, thanks Global Shapers for having us. So, yeah, Ben Lesher. I sort of have two hats. One is board member of Chestnut Housing Corporation, which was a nonprofit started by my church, East Chestnut Street Mennonite Church, and basically we provide affordable housing for families that are coming out of homelessness, and we work with various community partners, and happy to share more about that. The other hat is I'm president and founder of SDL DevCo. I'm a real estate developer that focuses mostly on multi-family development. I like to do urban redevelopment infill projects. Right now I'm developing Stadium Row apartments near the stadium and have a few other projects in the works. Yeah, I would say in terms of what inspires me, I think my faith compels me to help the least fortunate and those in poverty. I think I was influenced in college. I took a number of classes on poverty and urban issues, and particularly interested in income inequality and income segregation. So, affordable housing kind of pulls together some of those pieces of places and income. So, yeah, thanks.
No problem. Would you mind sharing your pronouns
Sure,
too?
yes, he and him.
Thank you. Carlos, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Carlos Graupera. I'm the president and CEO. We got a president. I'm the CEO now of the Spanish American Civic Association. And I guess I'm here because we're a community builder. And we work in an organization that is very much steeped in community development. We try to invest in our community in the area of behavioral health, services to senior, community health advocacy, workforce development, economic development at the neighborhood level, and affordable housing. The reason that I became involved in this is because I belong to a community that is afflicted by structural poverty, where people are underemployed, and since it is a community that is fairly recent in its arrival to Lancaster, it doesn't have the longevity that other groups are here, it does try to get a seat at the table in terms of its agenda, and we try to facilitate the ability of the Latino community to be fully engaged in the development of Lancaster. Something funny happens along the way. I've been at this for 48 years. We became less ethnic-oriented and more community-oriented. Our client is the neighborhood. Doesn't matter who it is, where you come from. We're concerned about issues of poverty and how and work to see how people can best overcome poverty and become sustainable.
Did you want to talk at all about what drives you to continue doing that work?
Well, it's a community that I belong in. I live and work in the southeast area, which is our area of focus. So the people that I work with are my neighbors, my friends, my family. And I want to make sure I do a good job for them.
Thank you, Carlos. Did you want to share your pronouns with us too?
He, him.
Thank you so much. And then Ryan, if you'd like to do your introduction.
Hi, my name is Ryan Gabriel Davis, and my pronouns are he and him. And I am the founder and developer behind the Starlight Saloon project, which is primarily an LGBTQ nightclub coming to the west end of Lancaster that also offers affordable housing above its establishment. And I'm currently raising funding for this project on GoFundMe. I'm at $40,000 right now, and I need $150,000 in addition to qualify for my loan to get this project off the ground. As far as the affordable housing aspects, we will be a very small program offering 3 to 4 apartments, housing 1 to 2 tenants in partnership with the Lancaster LGBT Coalition and their HEART program. And their HEART program serves 19 to 23-year-olds and it creates affordable, communal, affirming housing, offering housing subsidies on sliding scales based on income, plus funding for basic needs, relocation costs, and more. This might be a surprise, but my passion is not affordable housing. It's event producing and building and woodworking. I just saw an opportunity here in the development of this project and to spin innovation on a commercial property, create opportunities for growth, shelter, safety, and community for a marginalized community, which I'm specifically speaking for the LGBTQ folks.
Thank you. Did you want to talk about what drives you to continue this work at all?
This work of mine was planted in my head at 13, and I'm 27 years old now, and I've been working on this project for about 5 years, and just came out to the public in this past February on this idea. It mainly started because I didn't see a space that reflected the community that I'm a part of, and I wanted to create a colorful atmosphere for LGBTQ communities, and unfortunately now with the COVID pandemic, our spaces are obsolete, and I'm looking to fill this position and create an LGBTQ space that offers jobs, community, and housing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Ryan. We are going to go for our first question. Once again, I will just flag you if I feel like you're talking too long. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds great. So our first question is, what is your vision for the future of affordable housing, and what do you see as our future reality if we do not act anytime soon? Does anyone feel like that's speaking to you very firmly and you'd like to go first? If not, I'm just going to call on someone.
I can do it. I'll
Go
do
for it.
I got some notes.
You got
I don't know
it.
if y'all see, but I got notes. So I think it's a good question, because like, what is the future of affordable housing going to look like? And one of the things that I think we have to answer before we even get there is, what do we mean by affordable housing? You might have, if you're from Lancaster, you might have seen a couple months ago there was an affordable housing project in the newspaper, and I'm not going to say what it was. But if you read the fine print, that particular project said they're going to define affordable housing by 80% of the median income for the county of Lancaster. And this project is going to be situated in Lancaster City. So that's problematic right from the outset, because we're defining affordable housing all over the place. If you know anything about Lancaster County and Lancaster City, you probably do. The county of Lancaster's median income is about 50% higher than the city of Lancaster's median income. So right away, we're using 80% of the median income of the county, which is 50% higher. But a lot of times we're throwing around the term affordable housing, and actually what we really are talking about is we want equitable housing for people that have less money, right? We want good, safe, affordable housing for people that are lower income households, because they're the ones we're concerned about. When we look at the data, those are the households that are struggling the most in terms of being able to afford their housing. I appreciated your slides, Jen, that you had kind of flowing before we started, because the definition really of affordable housing is paying no more than 30% of your income towards your housing costs. And one of the things we're like, well, where did that come from? It's actually been around with a while, right? We go back to the 1960s, the Housing Act, and it was an amendment in there. And specifically in there, we were talking about making sure people in public housing, which is subsidized housing for poor people, basically, weren't paying more than 25% of their housing costs at that point, because we were looking at that in the 1960s. We were saying, you know what, these people are struggling, and we need to make a benchmark. They shouldn't be spending more than 25% of their income towards housing. Later in 1980, it was bumped up to 30%. So that's sort of where we get this idea. It was actually something put in place to protect lower income households. But if we look at the data, we can see, and you had this slide up here earlier about housing cost burden. That's actually talking about people paying more than 30% of their income towards housing, put you at risk of homelessness. And if you're familiar, we have about 600,000 people that are homeless in the United States on a daily basis. So this is like a lot of people. We don't want them at risk of being homeless. But in 2019, there were over 31 million households that were housing cost burdened. So like, that's a lot. You know, that's a lot of people. And it's actually specifically really hurting people who were low income. So among households that were earning $30,000 or less, 81% of those households are paying too much for rent. In fact, some households are paying more than half of their income. About 18 million households are paying more than half of their income towards rent. And we really want them to be paying 25%. So I think the focus of the conversation needs to be around lower income households. Like, it's kind of a joke if we're talking about affordable housing and we're not talking about rich people being able to afford their housing. Like, that's not, we're not concerned about that, right? So, like, that's what the conversation needs to be. How do we make sure there's fair, safe, equitable housing for everybody? That doesn't mean we all need to live in luxury condos, but it means that we should have housing for people that's not infested with rats, that's not having sewer backup in the basement, you know, that is safe, okay, for people. And I think that's fair. So I think we need to change the conversation. First, we need to talk about that. What does affordable housing really look like, you know? One of your other slides said that the average rent, I was gonna have you Google it, but the average rent in Lancaster is gonna be over $1,000 for an apartment, right? There's no county or metropolitan area in the United States where if you're working a minimum wage job, you can afford housing, right, at that benchmark. So we need to think about that. What does the future look like if we have affordable housing? It looks good if we can figure this problem out, right? Because there's some things that we know about affordable housing, right? It helps families. When you're not worrying about paying your housing costs, you're able to handle other things, like your health needs. People who have affordable housing are able to take care of their health issues. They're able to have economic mobility. They're able to improve their life outcomes. Kids are able to do better in school. And it also helps to address racial disproportionality, because people are disproportionately affected by poverty, people of color. So I think we need to do that. We need to talk about affordable housing like we're talking about housing for everybody, and we need to start to recast housing as a basic need. If I were to ask you, like, what are your basic needs? What would you say? Like food, clothing, shelter. Well, the thing about it is we look at food as a basic need. We have an entitlement program for people who are hungry. That means if I'm poor enough, I can apply for food stamps. And if I'm on food stamps, there's a pretty good chance that I'm not gonna be hungry anymore, right? I mean, the data show that. The issue is with housing, we don't look at it like an entitlement. If you're poor enough, you can apply for Section 8, which is like a housing choice voucher. You probably heard of that. That means that my rent's gonna be 30% of my income and that the voucher pays the difference. But housing choice vouchers are not treated like an entitlement, right? You get put on a waiting list, which in some cases might be 6 years or longer. So I think we need to start talking about housing for low-income households, and I think we need to start talking like housing is a basic need and make it an entitlement.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate the fact that you, I think, I personally agree with there should be a narrative switch. Instead of saying affordable housing, we do need equitable housing. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. You're welcome. Is there anyone else who would like to go next?
I'll check in.
Popcorn Ryan.
Hi. It's Dr. Frank, right?
You can call me Jen.
Jen?
Yeah.
Hi, Jen. I really like what Jen was speaking on about what does it look like. I think we all have imagery of what it looks like to us in our own head and its definition. To me, I think that affordable housing needs to be accessible to grocers, stores, bus stations, job opportunities, schools, and even the community. And I speak specifically for Lancaster City. I think community can save someone's life. You know, I think it can change someone's perspective on their survival in their environment. And I feel the city is looking at this as like some genuinity when it comes to affordable housing, when in reality, it's just been a lack of consideration. Our city's focus has been for quite a few years now, has been commercial development, and we're building, and at that point, our downtown has changed, the outskirts of downtown has changed. We have seen the Southern Market project come down, and I think that ultimately, you know, of course, gentrifies the city and raises the cost of living, which touches back to our wages. Our wages have continued to remain the same, and it makes this place unaffordable. And at that point, we lose what is Lancaster. We lose the people that are the familiar faces of our community, and it no longer is sensible to stay in a place that doesn't improve the quality of your life. Of course, this also runs headlong with race and class, and this urban problem is severe to economic and racial segregation, specifically affecting poor Blacks and Hispanic people. This urban problem solution needs reinvention, and I think that starts too with location and wage increase.
Thank you, Ryan. Do you want to touch on what do you see the future reality if we do not do any of that? We can also come back later.
No, I think there's a lot of people here, and there's people behind the scenes that want to see this place be affordable, and I hope that Lancaster continues to be with that intention. But honestly, I don't think it will. I think this city's focus will become too big, and the people that I know that live here will move out.
Thank you for your frankness. Carlos, is there anything you'd like to add? I can also restate the questions too.
I'll talk about the question if you like.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Well, the vision of affordable housing, in my view, is that affordable housing is in trouble. Affordable housing, the construction of affordable housing has not been affordable for quite some time. And to me and the people that I work with and the people in our community, we see the benefit of affordable housing seen through home ownership. Not necessarily multi-unit rental. We believe in home ownership. And in deference to our friends who are building multi-units, there is always this remark that, well, folks want to live in, folks want to rent. And I come back and say, folks want to buy. They'll rent if they have to, but give them an opportunity to buy, and they'll buy, because this is an ownership society. And I think that it's become unaffordable because of public policy. We have used housing funds and poverty in general as a business. Poverty is a business in America. And whenever dollars are put in place, people come from everywhere to access that money, not necessarily in ways that really benefits the community. I'll give you an example. I just cannot understand why, when we build affordable housing, it has to be at state prevailing wage. Well, why is that? Why did the cost of the house go up 30% because we have to pay affordable housing? Well, because somebody got to the lobbying and the legislature and made it happen. And so that is a clear example why affordable housing has stopped being affordable. I think that if the private sector left unchecked, the future of this community is going to be a city that is over-gentrified. And in order to address the issue of over-gentrification, which is happening in our community, it's a strong community public-private partnership that pushes the concept and holds developers and builders to do affordable housing and to promote home ownership. As long as our neighborhoods have homes that go rental, investors will create rental units and subdivide those homes into rooms and two-bedroom apartments where there should be just one house. When a community group buys that home, they turn it into a home ownership and to the advantage of the community. But I think there's also another issue that's linked to affordable housing, and that is workforce development. You know, the solution to a lot of gentrification and the issue of low home ownership is that people don't have the dollars to, and they're not earning the income that they need to become homeowners. So while we're talking about affordable housing, we have to worry about the fact that people are not making enough money, and that underemployment is the larger problem than unemployment. Unemployment tends to be low in Lancaster County, but underemployment is very high, and that's the problem that we have to attack. We've got too many good people going out with good work ethics and coming back not earning a livable wage, and those are the homeowners of this city in the future if we can make sure that they get the training that they need, workforce training that they need, and the placement that they need in occupational tracks that provide some level of advancement. Okay.
Thank you. And Ben, would you like to go next?
Sure.
You have
thank
no
you.
choice.
I knew it was coming. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with, several points here. I mean, I do think we need to think about housing as a basic need, as infrastructure. Some people are starting to talk about it in that way. I think the more, that I've sort of worked in this industry as a real estate developer, I've also worked for a low-income housing tax credit developer. The costs just to build and construct, to buy land, to pay all the professionals involved, it's a lot. And so to do all that, we have to have certain rents, to make the numbers work. And when I look to the future, I mean, in some ways, honestly, I think we just need more supply. We need more housing, even at all levels. And, there's a lot of restrictions and barriers to producing new housing in the city and other places. Even if you look outside, especially if you look outside the city and the county, I mean, there are very few places that are zoned for a whole lot of residential density, and there's a lot of sort of NIMBYism and people that don't want, those people, living in their community, producing traffic or crowding the school or, whatever. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have the answer. It's hard for me to know what that vision is, but I hope that we can start to have some of these conversations about shifting, about talking about, that this is a basic need. And, the more that I think about this, the more that I think we need to work actually on the income side of families and households. You can sort of only bring the costs down so far, and, housing costs are important, but healthcare is important, and education's important, and food's important. So, that's sort of the way I look at it. Yeah, I don't know if I answered every piece of those questions.
That's okay. I think it was kind of a two-parter. The second part was, what do you see as our future reality if we do not do the things that we said should be done? Yeah,
I mean, I think we'll start to see, continue to see more sort of income, segregation, and people have to leave the city or other places in search of that, or become homeless. But Yeah.
Thank you. Not that I was asked, I think it would turn into Hunger Games. I'm pretty sure that's what would happen. Yes, so for our next question, it's worded, what can everyday citizens do to help? And based off of the discussion we just had, it kind of feels weird to word it that way. So I would say more so, what do you think folks as individuals can do to pressure the folks who do have the power to change these things? What can we do to help shift things in the right direction? Is there anyone who would like to go first?
I will. I don't
Yes,
mind.
Jen?
It's my turn.
Thank you, Jen.
So I'm so glad you reworded that question.
Yeah, it was bugging me.
Yes, because everybody wants to know, like, what can I do? So there are some students in here, so spoiler alert. I tend to tell the story of the starfish on the beach. Do you know the story of the starfish on the beach, where it's like there's a little boy and his grandfather, and they're walking along, and there's starfish all over the beach, and the little boy throws one back in and another one back in the ocean, and the grandfather says, well, why are you doing that? Like, there's so many starfish. And he's like, well, it mattered to that one. Well, I find that to be so cheesy and annoying. I think they told it at our graduation, right? With the valedictorian tell a story. So it's like this popular story. And when I teach macro practice, I say, well, why are there so many starfish on the beach? Yeah, it mattered to that one. And the little boy felt really good throwing that starfish back. But, like, we have a major problem here. And I think we need to reorient our conversation to talk about advocacy. Because there might not be a list. Now, I did bring a list of things that people can do, which is kind of annoying. But there's not necessarily a list. Like, we like to help individuals, and we like to do one thing, but it's a big problem. We have an empathy problem in the United States. I was actually reading, one of my bad habits is reading the comments on NPR articles. Don't do that. Don't do that in the morning when you're having your coffee and you're trying to kind of get in the vibe for the day, and it's not a good way to do that. But I was reading this article about this lady who, and this is an unfortunate situation, where a lady was mauled by a bear and to death in her tent, right? I don't know, did anybody read this article?
I did.
Did you read that? It was I hope you didn't read the comments. The comments were like, too bad for her, it's her own fault, she shouldn't have been in the tent, what an idiot. And I'm like, this is the country we live in right now. We have zero empathy for people. The lady was mauled by a bear to death, and no one cared, right? It's like we have no empathy. Well, we don't have a lot of empathy for poor people in the United States because we have so much residential segregation by income. If you think about, like, the neighborhood you grew up in, it was probably a lot of people that had similar income backgrounds to your household because we segregate like that. You know, we have pockets of poverty. And what does that do? It actually has us disconnected from people with economic differences. And so we're less likely to have empathy for our neighbor and less likely to have empathy for someone in poverty because we don't know them. We don't know their struggle, you know? So I think we need to, one of the things that we can do is start to have a conversation about empathy and start actually caring, you know? We need to use our heart at some point and care because our policy needs to be informed by our morals and our ethics and our values. And when that's not the case, when we let the market run rampant and we let economics make all of the decisions, we have a problem. We have a problem with gentrification in Lancaster, and you're probably aware of that. There's a lot of money to be made off of people's housing precarity, which is really ethically problematic. We need to, how many HGTV shows do we need about flipping houses to make $1 million? This gets to be really troublesome, right? We're talking about a basic need. We don't tend to talk like about food like that. So I think we need to change the conversation. We need to address poverty. We have to do something about that, right? We're not going to change this one household at a time. We need to address poverty. We need to look at things like income inequality. We need to look at things like a guaranteed income for people. It's worked in many places. What do people do when they're given a little money? Well, they pay their bills. They don't blow it. So it actually stimulates the economy. We need to look at some of these things that actually work. Again, we need to make housing vouchers an entitlement rather than a waiting list program. I think we need to connect with grassroots movements and organizations. There's a lot of movements like this group apparently is very active. There's a group that I'm involved with called Put People First PA that does a lot of grassroots movement about poverty in this area and throughout Pennsylvania. The Poor People's Movement hear people's stories, do a lot of reading. So I was at the beach last week and I brought a stack of books. They were I had The End of Poverty, I had Reinventing Food Banks, all these sort of moral dilemma books. And I decided, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna read this old 1992 Sidney Sheldon trash novel, right? It's they're great beach read. Turned out to be about this lady who was going through and buying a real investment banker, going through redoing all the housing in New York City, making millions of dollars. I'm like, I can't even get away with this, So what we need to read, don't read the Sidney Sheldon, right? We need to read this material, learn about it, hear people's firsthand stories, challenge complacency, and we need to advocate. How do we do that? So I did bring a handout, if anybody's interested. I created this for one of my macro classes. So this again is a spoiler, but it's a little menu, advocacy menu of just things that you can do. Some of it might not relate, but go to a city council meeting, put public comments in at the school board meeting, these kinds of things, the grassroots effort, let your voice be heard. Call Smart Talk, right? I get the students to call Smart Talk. Talk to Scott Lamar. Get on the radio, right? Get in the conversation. I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ben, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, there's, so my background educationally is I have a master in city planning, and so I've been following a lot of people on Twitter recently talking about yes in my backyard movement, kind of opposition to not in my backyard movement. And I mean, I totally agree we need more affordable housing, but I'm a firm believer we just need more housing, across the board. And there's a lot of barriers to that, and not to get into the weeds or bore you too much, but there is, if you really want to get into it, in my opinion, start looking at zoning and municipal ordinances. And because a lot of times when these projects come out and go to the public meetings, it's too late. I mean, the community already decided what should go there. And so, I think Councilman Smith-Waddell was talking about this too. I think the city's going through they're doing a new comprehensive plan, and so this is the time to kind of get involved and think about what do you want your community to look like, and where and how much housing are you going to allow. I'm a huge proponent of more density, and density helps solve a lot of challenges. And the more units you can build on a site, the less costly it is to do that, and the less you have to charge in rent or when you go to sell it to a homeowner. So that's kind of one thing. I think the other thing is, it's great and it's easy to talk about we want affordable housing, but to me the question is, well, who's going to pay for that? And I would like to see our city and our county and others step up to that plate a little bit more personally, and obviously as people that vote and constituents, I think we can call for that and ask for more funding to be allocated for housing, and specifically affordable housing. So I think those are, probably the two things that I would say.
Thank you. Carlos, would you like to share?
Well, I think we all have a voice,
Yeah.
and I think that we need to use it. And I think it's very important for any community, certainly our community, to have a vision, a unified vision of what kind of city we want to be. And that'll drive our development. And that vision, I think, should be a thriving downtown and thriving neighborhoods, not one at the expense of the other, which happens in many cities. Lancaster's beginning to recognize, through city government and through a lot of nonprofit groups and the business sector, that unless neighborhoods are healthy, downtown and the entire development of the city will suffer. So that is a good place to start to reach a consensus that the kind of housing we're going to have is going to involve all price points, that there's going to be affordable housing middle-income housing, and I don't mind bumping into the luxury apartment dwellers. They have a place here too. Everybody has a place here. And cities are not going to act in a way that diminishes their tax base. So we understand that there's going to be a tug between affordable housing and more housing for the wealthier members of our society. But we can hold public officials feet to the fire. We need to convince the business community that it is in their interest to look beyond downtown and beyond their industrial parks, because in these neighborhoods are their labor force, and their labor force needs good housing, and it needs to be healthy, and it needs to be able to have the skills to advance, increase their income, become homeowners, and contribute to a healthy community. That's a lot of work to get to that unified vision, but I think that there are enough people and enough groups in the community that we can begin to build that consensus.
Thank you. And last but not least, Ryan.
I don't know where to start. Everyone was saying a lot of great points there, and I agree with everybody on their statements. I definitely like what you were saying about the vision of Lancaster, and I think for quite some time we're still trying to figure ourselves out as a city. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were just a town, and now we're calling ourselves a city, and yeah, I think it's transforming, and in somewhere along the journey, we've got a little lost in our consideration of what and who makes Lancaster here. And I think with starting, like, what you could do or what we could do is ultimately, like, getting in touch with our government. Our government is super local and honestly super easy to find. And I see them come into the picture. I see them come into the community when the community is, like, pressing on matters that are important to them, and like a fire lit under someone's ass. Like, I see, them speaking on topics just by people that want to see change in the community. And yeah, your voice does count and does matter. And one person speaking can ricochet a whole bunch of other voices. I specifically work a lot with the LGBTQ community in Lancaster City, and the HEART program that I'll be in partnership as the Starlight Saloon is developed and founded by the Lancaster LGBT Coalition, and that program exists. I believe they have 6 units now for LGBTQ individuals, and they accept funding for that on their website, and they have a list of things that your funding goes towards this housing assistance. As far as the Starlight Saloon project, we're still raising funds to see this amazing project come to fruition, and you can check us out on GoFundMe.com/Starlight Saloon or thestarlightsaloon.com. Yeah, again, like everyone was speaking here, definitely a lot more educated on this topic than I am, and I'm, in a learning position here, and I think that has a lot to do, like I said, with using your voice and getting in touch with your local government. They're very, very friendly faces and easy to network and talk to, so that's my piece there.
Thank you, Ryan. I will also mention, if you were not aware, all city council meetings are now in person, so you can actually go there and yell at them. Might find me there. Right now, is there anything that anyone on the panel would specifically like to discuss or talk about that we have not covered yet? I'd like to open it up to you all first before we go into a Q&A.
I'll just make one more shameless plug.
Go for it.
This is something else you can do, but so I'm also representing Chestnut Housing Corporation, which we're a local nonprofit served by my church, but feel free to donate to Chestnut Housing Corporation. So we participate in Extra Give, and so check us out. But yeah, we've been around now for 10 years, but basically several people from our church decided we needed to get involved in our community, and so we managed to buy and manage about 10, now 12 units, just a few blocks from our church. And basically all the families that live in our homes are coming out of homelessness, and we work with Tabor, which is now Tenfold, and Good Samaritan, and Milagro House, and I think some others to kind of get referrals. And then we also require that the tenant works with a caseworker for a year just to help them figure out sort of their personal finances, get utilities set up, and then if there are any issues, we can kind of work with them and the caseworker to try to figure it out. But yeah, sorry to
You're fine.
do a shameless plug.
Any other plugs? Also, I'm a big fan of Saka. If you are not aware of them, I highly suggest looking up their work. It's amazing.
No plugs here.
No plugs?
No.
I will say you should definitely put out our homework sheets that
I
you
have a
brought.
homework sheet,
That'd be fantastic. Would love that.
Yeah.
So now we are going to open it up for a Q&A. Hello, audience. How we feeling? We all still here? Wow. So I'm not sure the best way to do this.
So if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and I'll trust the panel to select folks there. But if the panel or here specifically can repeat the question for our broadcast, that way it picks up on the mics, that would be great.
No problem. So, any questions? Yes.
My name is Joshua, and I have a question for Ben, correct? Talking about reducing cost in construction, I just read Elon Musk's book and SpaceX, and that was kind of his thing, just reducing cost anywhere possible to be very affordable and outbeat the competition. What are areas in construction where you see that cost can be reduced with innovation or, yeah, you know more than me, so what do you think can be reduced?
Yeah, so paraphrase the question, what are ways that I see we can reduce the cost of construction to help produce affordable housing? It's a great question. If I knew the answer, I wish I knew the answer. Yeah, I mean, it's something I think a lot about. Interestingly enough, there was a large kind of tech startup called Graupera. I don't know if anybody saw this. They were supposed to disrupt construction, and they just went bankrupt and whatever. And so, I think one of the things, I'm still new at this, but one of the things I'm learning is construction is a very complicated thing. I mean, you might have 20 or 25, 30, maybe even 50 different trades all working, in the same space trying to produce this thing. We've also, a lot of the construction we've done, we've also been doing it for like 100 years plus, and so it's sort of like, I think we've kind of figured it out maybe. But again, it's sort of like, obviously you have material costs, but you have labor costs, right? So do you want to pay your laborers less? Well, that's not a great idea. One of the things I have explored is how to get smaller units. And something we're doing at Stadium Row is we have some units that are 460 square feet, and you know, that's not, in grad school I was really interested in micro apartments, and that's not a micro apartment, but for this area that's smaller, you know, and but still for, you know, at Stadium Row we're still charging $1,000 a month for that. That's what we need to make it work. And you know, I'm not, for some people that's affordable, but a lot of people that's not. But so that's one of my interests, is try to get smaller units and get people to realize they don't need as much space, and you know, they can still have safe, you know, decent quality housing. You know, in a family context, that's a little bit harder. They probably need a little more space. So yeah, I mean, I don't, you know, construction costs are probably 70% of your cost to build that unit. I mean, you have land and things, but yeah, I don't know. I'd be open to hear if others have ideas on that, but thanks.
Jen, I'd love if you had any
I feel like I
comments
have
on
an
this.
idea about Elon Musk telling people to cut costs, actually. My heart's going to burn out of my chest, right? That's like telling poor people you can't afford your housing because you're not budgeting right. Yeah. Right? Cut costs, pay your workers less, buy crappy lumber, buy crappy materials so that the house falls apart. I mean, we just had that whole building in Florida collapse. Like, Elon Musk telling us to cut costs doesn't feel right. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to add to that question at all? No pressure. No? Okay, great. Do we have any other audience questions? Yes.
I'm Bob Bowman. Ben did one thing correct. We need more of all units of housing. And Carlos is right that ownership is the best way of doing housing. Now, if I know Lancaster City, most every plot of land has a structure on it already. So, looking at Lancaster City in particular, do you see any possibility of taking properties that are on structures now and making them into condo type units which can be sold? And affordability, of course, becomes more affordable as you do in fact own the property.
Is there anyone who has something to add to that? I'm a little confused by your question, only because I'm pretty sure we are literally doing that right now. We do have structures that are condos that are currently being built out. So are you saying, other than those ones, are you saying specific, you're saying more?
Well, for instance, down at the seashore, they've torn down all the old small buildings.
So you're saying remove small houses to put condos?
Yes, or in other words, one way of reducing costs is divide by two instead of by one.
If I may, maybe related to this, I think the question is how to get more housing, and maybe in a for sale context that's affordable. You know, one of the conversations that I think as a city we may soon need to start having is, again, from my perspective as a developer, a lot of the zoning in the city is really great. It's very flexible, allows for a lot of density. However, most of the city is actually in the Heritage Conservation District or a historic district. And basically, if you want to go do a development, you know, and you need to do a demolition to build more housing, I mean, even if it's a commercial building that you want to demo to do some housing, you need their approval. And it's a very subjective thing, in my opinion. It's also a high bar. And I am a little concerned that it presents, you know, most of the city is built on, right? I mean, there's not that many completely vacant lots left. And so it just makes me a little concerned that we're choosing maybe to preserve historic architecture over housing. And, I just, that is a concern I have. I don't know if anybody else does, but it's a way of limiting development and housing supply. Now, I don't know that just that is immediately going to unlock all this housing, but.
I think that we've taken just about every warehouse available and converted it, so there's not much of that left. I think we've done a good job in converting empty spaces. What we're left with is neighborhoods that have row homes. And we've made neighborhoods in most of the city fall into the historic category. So it's going to be very difficult. Lancaster has always been adverse to demolition. It's a rarity in this town because it has a vision of it being historic and old and wants to preserve its colonial past. So I think the issue is what can you do with neighborhoods where there are row homes? We got to make sure that every single one of those homes, to the greatest extent possible, becomes a place for home ownership. We do have the Sunnyside Peninsula that we ought to have a conversation with the city about the disposition of that. That's a lot of housing potential right there. We build small projects, 20 and 20 homes, and then we say, well, this is it because there's never going to be another plot of land, and then we find another one. So, behind trees there are these opportunities, empty lots here and there that you could really continue the development of home ownership projects.
Thank you. I believe, Barry, you're next.
This is for Ben. Ben, I apologize if this comes across as a rude question. I don't intend that. But if you're charging $1,000 rent for a 460 square foot space in Stadium Road, how is that addressing the equitable housing problem?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I guess my answer to that would be the way that I look at the housing market across the whole city is that we have a lot of people that need housing, and they're sort of coming here already here, whether, we like it or not. And that person that can afford that $1,000, at Stadium Row is not going into another, maybe a one-unit row house that was converted into 2 units instead of living in that, and that person, raising that rent from $800 to $1,000, now they're living at Stadium Row. That's sort of the way I look at it in terms of, just the market for housing. If there's people that can afford it, I'm building it for them at Stadium Row instead of going somewhere else. I've talked to a lot of friends and families that own, several units here and there in the last 5 years. If they get a turn, they can easily raise the rent like, $50, $100 a month. So.
And again, as we heard very much at the beginning of this session, $1,000 figure as an average rent is out of reach for many, many of the people in the city.
I believe you were next. Hi.
Hi, my name is Lucy. I grew up here in Lancaster. I didn't grow up in Lancaster City. I grew up in the county, but my grandparents lived here in the city on the property. We moved back here from Philadelphia almost 10 years ago, and we bought a house. We bought a house in the Chestnut Hill neighborhood. We bought the ugliest house, the nicest lot. And that is something that is happening less and less because it seems like all over our neighborhood, there's these private sales happening. There's
I can tell you that I used to buy a home for $50,000 in the southeast. And I could take my sweet time in making an offer because nobody else was going to bid on it. Now I better hurry up, and I'm paying $80,000, $90,000 for really crappy homes that need a lot of improvement. So that's where we're at. I tell my team not to blink if you see a for sale sign and the, pardon me? Oh, I know. I know. Well, and that is, you know, nothing we can do about those private exchanges. But if there is a for sale sign, I tell my folks, don't wait, grab it, because an investor will pick it up and beat you to it and beat you at the price. And if we buy it, it'll be home ownership. And if we don't buy it, an investor will turn it into a rental.
Well, I mean, I think that's where we need to talk to our legislators and get policy enacted to stop stuff like that. Right. Yeah. But I think what Carlos is saying, there's not policy now to prohibit it.
I think municipal government has a really important role in making sure that the housing stock, whether it's a property that comes by eminent domain into the hands of the city, or is substandard, and the city puts through code enforcement some pressure on the owner to sell the home to the city or to a nonprofit developer. I think that needs to happen more and more, and that'll stop a lot of the piracy that is out there in terms of housing.
And I believe I saw your hand first. White shirt? Yes.
I have a question. What is the interaction in affordability related to property assessment and specifically school funding? That is a kind of if I move outside of the city proper, property taxes tend to go down in the county versus the city. And for my small way of thinking about it, that really drives housing costs up by the tax base. So I'm just sort of curious about solutions or big ideas related to policy and taxation.
I am totally unqualified to answer that question.
Really glad I'm the moderator. Anyone feel that they are qualified to answer that question?
No, but I would say just talk to your legislator again.
Yeah, that sounds
I
like
feel
a city
that's the
council
answer to
meeting
everything,
question.
Yeah.
There,
It's a good point.
there,
The fair funding formula potentially would equalize school funding and make schools
Yep.
less liable to raise property taxes and perhaps you're saying.
Yeah, I agree with you. No, I don't know much about it, but I agree with you.
that's
Because
what, there's some legislation right now being proposed, right? It's called the Fair Funding Formula.
Funding for
That's supposed to, yeah.
The state-based education subsidy was being channeled through the fair funding formula, but the rest of state funding is going through an old-fashioned formula that essentially rewards districts that had a lot of students 20, 30 years ago. The legislation, the push is to have 100% of funding go through the fair funding formula, which would certainly benefit high poverty districts,
Right.
school district 1, district 1.
Awesome. Blue shirt?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about affordable housing as a cost, but we haven't necessarily discussed the quality of life aspect of it. And I'm not letting people off the hook necessarily for $1,000 a month for a small apartment being affordable, but I can guarantee you that $600 a month with old windows and an old furnace is going to cost
mean, I would just make a comment to agree with you, right? Because housing, low-income housing is precarious. People who are renting $600 a month apartments that are falling apart have very difficult challenges every month about what to report and if to say anything at all, right? Because you're afraid you're going to lose your housing. If you make a complaint, your landlord gives you 30 days to get out, and your credit's shot, you got evicted before, where are you going to go now? You know, you're going to have to move. You're going to have to move in with someone else and sleep on the floor or something like that. So it gets really tough for tenants in that kind of situation. And I think we have, you know, some affordable housing in our community through different nonprofits and so forth. That's challenging for people with criminal backgrounds, challenging if you had evictions in the past, challenging if you have anything on your credit report. You know, it's affordable, but only for creaming off the top of like the best tenant in the world. So people who are in $600 a month apartments and they have problems like bad credit or eviction, like they're in a precarious situation. So I hear what you're saying.
In real life, people can afford that $1,000 a month rent. But to get there, those units are overpopulated. There's more people there, splitting up the rent cost. And that's how many of our families make do. And that is not a good quality of life for children, to be raised in a home where there's just too many people in it. But that's how our families who are low income are making do with the increased cost of housing.
I would add that it doesn't just hurt that family, it hurts economically the whole community. Because if you're spending 85% of your income towards housing, you have exactly $0 to spend in the economic district downtown, right? So when we think about that, like, it's affecting everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually like kind of thinking a lot about what Barry said and what you said up there, sir, in the blue, and then these conversations is like, you know, if someone can afford $1,000, 460 square foot apartment that moves here, like, who are they? Like, they don't seem like they're actually our community members. And if they are able to move from New York City and live in these spaces, well, that's one less job we have here for somebody that needs a job that's been here. And that just kind of reflected in what you were saying about the people that do live in these $600 a month apartments are not able to invest their money back into the community.
Thank you. Jen.
Hi, my name is Jen. I'm a member of Global Shapers. My question is, we've talked a lot about how workforce development, salary raises will help this issue. And we're also talking about how the steep economic development of our city has made it really difficult to make affordable housing possible. So is there a reality in which economic development thrives, continues, and we see that growth, and we're able to fund housing for our community, for the members who have been here, for the members who need to have, who have been here for a while, who are the faces and the identity of our neighborhoods that exist now? How do we have those two ideas coexist, or can we?
You mean workforce development and?
Yeah, how do we continue to grow economically as a city and protect the housing costs or like housing burdenness of our community today? Can those two ideas coexist? Can we have affordable housing and economic growth together?
In my view, you have to raise the income of people in the city. You just, you have to do that. And you have to do that with workforce development programs that favor people who have been in the labor market making very little money and what we think is a solution is community-based workforce development centers that work with community colleges and technical schools, and so that we bring those resources out of the campus and into the neighborhoods. And I think that the more we can do that, the more we will see families that are increasing their income level and can then begin to think about home ownership and can even dream of setting up their own homes. But you have to go to the source of the problem, is that people don't have money. And we have to really make an effort to invest in the effort to get people into sustainable income so that we can address the housing and the business development issue as well. I think those things are linked.
Anyone else like to add to that? No? Go ahead.
To follow up on this idea about workforce development, I wonder if it's really the workforce that we need to develop, or if it's the employers who may need to accept a shift in how we pay people, how we schedule them for their jobs, and kind of where the jobs actually are. If they are available in Lancaster City, if they are available, if you don't have your own private transportation. If you don't have that transportation, are they available by public transportation? What is public transportation like here in Lancaster? Absolutely, people should get credentialed. They should get their GED. They should be supported in employment and training programs, something I know about in my personal employment with the state. But if we're still only going to pay them $9 an hour, the $1,000 a month studio apartment is still out of reach. So what do we do? And what do you do as an advocate and a person who's already working in this environment to say, you know, we already know the people who need the help, but who are the other people who should be doing the help?
Can I address that?
Of course.
You know, if you have a skill, employers are going to pay you handsomely, and there's a lot of money to be made. Where we have income disparity is when people are untrained, and then they end up with $10 an hour jobs. And that's a lot of it in the hospitality industry, which is so big in this county. But if we train people to become plumbers, electricians, and people involved in allied health, we're giving them a pathway forward with a future. And we have to work very hard at getting folks that are at that $10 an hour job that leads to nowhere into occupational tracks that they can thrive and develop in. I think that is a path that we continually need to move through as a community.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to add?
I'll step in. I was hearing you about the plumbers and trade work. I work in the trade industry. I'm a contractor, and I do a lot of build work and repair work. And I think it still is affected what you were concerned about, even in the trade industry, with people that have skill or don't have skill. And I think that I'm not really sure that the employers that are generations above me are going to be changing the way they're thinking and paying people. I think people in my generation will, and that may take some time to weed out, but I've seen in the trade industry, even at my wage, which I'm not disclosing, but have contractors double my rate to a homeowner. So on the bill, it looks like I'm X when I'm really just half of that, and the homeowner is paying for it.
And I believe we have time for one more question. Go ahead.
I'm Barry as well. There's a joke with that, but I won't. But anyway, someone talked about gentrification, or, well, the number of folks that, I live on a very small block, the west end of town. We are a block long between Walton and Chestnut, and we have about 20 houses on our block, somewhat diverse neighborhood, it seems, but in the past number of months, 4 of those houses on the block have lit. And they are now, you can look on, Zillow or whatever, and they are anywhere between $350,000 and $380,000. And they are the size of my small building. I'm a 2-unit owner-occupied facility. So that's, it's happening, and, I'm pretty aware on the clock, and all of a sudden, like, bam, one day they're there, and the next day, gone, and, not sure how to alleviate that. But my comment is, and I don't mean to be mean or anything, but, we have been having this discussion for years and years and years, and I could probably look at Facebook, and probably 10 years ago, we were having a similar discussion. I would like to see the wherewithal from our elected officials, that they step up to the plate and really claim something. In other cities around the country, communities are demanding a certain level of affordable housing. A number of the facilities that are coming in, I just read the new facility on West King Street, 80 units, and they are hoping that 10% of those might be affordable housing. And there's always that if there. Why can't we be like other communities that if a developer wants to come into a community, would demand that they put 20, 25% affordable housing? Someone asked earlier, how do we pay that? How do we pay for that? We can pay for a heck of a lot of stuff. We can certainly figure out ways to pay for people to eat, to live, and to thrive in our community. And adding on to that, we have quite a number of organizations in our community that are working on this issue. I would like to see a concerted effort from that group to come up with a game plan to say in X number of years we want to see this, and here's what people can do. We're going to go lobby our local municipalities, our state legislators, and move forward. I'm getting up there in age, and my wish one day is to see this heaven on earth that we keep talking about. And so I'm going to try and continue to push and shove but we have to get beyond conversation and get, So thank you for this. I didn't mean to end it on
You're okay. I appreciate your commentary very much, and it sounds like something that a lot of what we've discussed. I do want to get in. Did you have a question? I would like to try and get your question in before we wrap up.
Sure. Hi, I'm Ashley Blanchard. This question is specifically for Carlos, but happy to open it up to everyone. So you mentioned strong public-private partnerships as part of the solution to the housing crisis. So what does that look like for you, and could you share a uplifting example of that being done well in Lancaster?
The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and other states have tax credit incentives called the Neighborhood Assistance Program. We use it a lot. And banks use it, utility companies use it. We are beneficiaries of those dollars to do workforce development, to buy homes, to fix homes. And it's a wonderful program, and it's a wonderful way for business to get involved. However, it's one of the best kept secrets around, because banks know all about it, Utility companies all know all about it, but most of our business community is oblivious to the fact that they can participate, get a lot of the tax burden taken away, mitigated by participating with nonprofits. They keep their money in this community instead of going to Harrisburg, and they get credit for the contributions that they make in recognition. Business can do some serious contributions here with communities and governments to advance housing and workforce development. I'll give you an example. I'm really proud of some banks and corporations that have pledged for the next 6 years to provide $200,000 contributions for our workforce development. Well, 200,000 is not a dramatic number, but multiplied by 12, that's $1.2 million that we're going to use to buy equipment for training folks in high demand occupations. If we could also do that with affordable housing, we could really take care of a lot of our needs. The other issue too is that those of us that go to the chamber and hang around the forums, it's the same companies and it's the same people there all the time, and you get a sense that there's these other companies in the county making a lot of money, but they're not connected to our community. They're doing business, and they're doing business internationally, and they could care less about the local scene because that's not how they make their money. We should get our business leadership to reach out to those folks to say, if you're here, contribute here. And don't get me started on why I can't get a pizza delivered in my neighborhood, because that's what really got me into this business. I asked for a pizza one night, and they said, we don't deliver in your area. I went into a rage because that's just a human right, pizza.
Thank you so much. We are going to wrap up this discussion. Thank you so much, audience, for participating. Thank you to the panel for being here and answering your questions. And thank you to me for being here.
Thank you.
Kirsten, you did such a great job. You beat me to it. Let's give it up for our panel and our fabulous moderator, Kirsten. Yeah, we'll wrap up quickly here, but one of the things that made me fall in love with this place in the first place was the honesty of the members in this community when they speak on tough issues, and I think we saw that tonight between our panel and community members, and just admitting, we don't have all the answers on this. We're not going to have all the answers on this, but some things that I really wanted to amplify and elevate that was said on the panel is continue to speak out to local officials, continue to read, continue to take up space and raise your voice for the community and the policies that you want to see, that you need, that your neighbors need. That's the way we're going to evoke change here. So thank you so much to our panelists. A few things before we go. Thank you to those of us who have joined the series virtually, our friends on the camera, hello. We hope that everyone leaves feeling more informed, inspired, and empowered to see a future of affordable housing that works for everyone. If you would like to give a gift of support, we are through this series supporting Tenfold. If you want to take a picture of that slide, you can donate to them or to any of the other organizations you might have heard tonight who really moved you and inspired you. We're also a very small group here in Lancaster, so if this series was impactful for you, we would invite you to give to us as well via that Venmo. Or if you want to give your time and you're between the ages of 18 and 27, or know someone who's really passionate about community issues or want to get involved in international development, we would encourage you to reach out to us. You can either apply directly at this link or email us at that address. And last but not least, I would like to take a moment to thank our curator from the last year, Madeline, who could not join us tonight, but she's on the camera too, and our vice curator, Alyssa. While Madeline could not join us, Alyssa, can you stand up and wave for us? You did some great leadership this year. Let's give it up for Alyssa. Let me tell you, these two ladies led us through a whole year of Google Meetups, and helped our hub feel connected and inspired to continue doing the work even in a virtual year. So, Alyssa, we have that little something for you, and Madeline will have something for you next time. But that's all we've got for you. Thank you so much again for joining us, and have a great night. What was that?